These are the most interesting historical photos and unusual objects from the past. Let's get 100,000 subscribers. In 1908, Sidney D. Gamble photographed a Chinese prisoner wearing a heavy wooden kang, a punishment device displaying the crime for public humiliation. This rare image documents the use of public shaming as legal practice in early 20th century China. In the 1930s, the Allen Nacillator was marketed as a metal device to relieve hay fever and sinus issues by spreading nostrils open. This advertisement shows early 20th century attempts at medical innovation using unusual personal gadgets. In Moscow in 1903, this fire brigade posed with cutting-edge breathing apparatuses used for emergency rescue in smoke-filled buildings. Each member specialized in roles like scaling, hose handling, or water supply, forming an advanced team for tackling urban fires. In 1916, a young Nikita Khrushchev was photographed with his first wife, Efrosinya, years before leading the Soviet Union. At this time, Khrushchev worked as a metal worker, making this formal portrait a rare glimpse into his early life. In the 1950s, scientists used laboratory tests using direct kissing to evaluate the durability of lipstick formulas. This unusual assessment method has become the standard for quality control of cosmetics. In 1919, workers at Short Brothers Works repaired the vast interior of a Zeppelin airship, sealing leaks to maintain safe flights. Airships like these marked the height of early aviation, but hydrogen disasters and rapid airplane advances soon ended their golden era. This antique hydrometer, also called an alcohol meter, measured the specific gravity of liquids to determine alcohol strength. Precision weights allowed for accurate readings, making the device essential in early scientific and distillery work. On July 20, 1944, a bomb exploded inside the Wolf's Lair headquarters near Rastenburg during a meeting, aiming to kill Adolf Hitler. The plot failed when Hitler survived with minor injuries, leading to a large-scale search for those involved. During the early slum clearance programs in Britain, health inspectors measured narrow gaps between buildings to assess living conditions. This process helped authorities map areas for demolition. Bottle kilns like these were used in the English pottery industry during the 19th and early 20th centuries to fire ceramics at high temperatures. Their distinct shape helped trap heat efficiently, making mass production of pottery and bricks possible. This rare device played music for callers placed on hold at home by vibrating sound through the telephone's base. Placing the handset on top activated a mechanical music box inside to entertain waiting callers. At Regent's Canal in London, female workers often hauled loaded barges along towpaths during the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This harsh physical labor was vital for transporting coal and goods before widespread adoption of motorized engines. During the severe winter of 1963 in Britain, snowdrifts buried streets and made daily tasks a struggle for millions. Postal workers continued their rounds on foot, delivering letters despite record cold and historic snowfall. On June 6, 1944, British commandos landed at Sword Beach in Normandy as part of the first wave of the D-Day invasion. Their mission was to secure strategic points and link up with airborne forces, launching the liberation of Western Europe from Nazi occupation. British commandos trained with human torpedoes, known as chariots, for covert attacks against enemy ships like the German battleship Tirpitz during World War II. These underwater craft were part of secret operations. In the early 20th century, engineers in Baltimore drove cars through newly built sanitary sewer tunnels to demonstrate their size and modern construction. On January 1, 1912, Constance Edwina, Duchess of Westminster, and the first wife of the second Duke of Westminster, went skiing in Switzerland. Early 20th century ski fashion combined full skirts and tailored jackets. In 1958, a group of young people gathered in the courtyard of Stockholm's royal palace to watch the changing of the guard ceremony. This long-standing tradition draws both locals and visitors, offering a living connection to Sweden's royal and military heritage. Between 1880 and 1904, Cirque Molière in Paris became famous for its aristocratic women performing daring equestrian stunts like the high leap captured here. This private circus blended elite society with professional acrobatics. At the beginning of the 20th century, tonic wine with phosphorin was advertised as a means of increasing energy and mood, supposedly helping to cope with fatigue and bad mood. Such tonic wines often contained alcohol and herbal extracts. In March 1916, women took up street sweeping in Liverpool at the intersection of Christian Street and Hunter Street, while men served in World War I. Their work kept the city functioning and marked a major shift in traditional gender roles on the home front. In Berlin in 1899, one of the world's first electric buses began transporting passengers, featuring multi-level seating and battery-powered propulsion. That same year, Russian engineer Ippolit Romanov built and tested electric omnibuses in St. Petersburg, marking the dawn of urban electric transport. At Cancale on the Brittany coast around the turn of the 20th century, oyster gatherers worked tidal flats revealed at low tide, forming one of France's oldest seafood industries. Harvesters known as crêchières carefully sorted and turned oysters by hand. In 1864-1865, young powder monkeys on warships like USS New Hampshire carried gunpowder charges through the ship's narrow passages to supply cannons during battle. These boys, often as young as 10, were chosen for their small size and agility. This 1863 image shows Washington's Capitol building under construction, with its distinctive dome rising above the city during the Civil War era. In front stands Trinity Episcopal Church, a landmark from 1851 to 1936. Japanese women working barefoot in flooded rice paddies in 1895 wore traditional bamboo hats for sun protection. Large-scale wet rice cultivation with irrigation had spread from the continent centuries earlier, transforming rural life and agricultural communities in Japan. Behind the scenes of the theater is a world of incredible mechanisms and craftsmanship, where thousands of kilograms of lighting equipment and complex systems for changing the scenery are hidden. In 1955, for one scene of a puppet cartoon, it was necessary to manually rearrange hundreds of figures and clouds, making one frame after another. For a minute of screen time, the animators created more than 1,400 individual frames using cotton wool and cardboard to detail each composition. This device is a vintage mechanical tachometer designed to measure the number of revolutions, RPM, of rotating machine parts and engines. For measuring, the tip was applied to the shaft, and the arrow on the dial recorded the maximum rotation speed for a certain time. The photo shows sinkers for fishing nets made of metal, common among sailors and fishermen to weight bottom and bottom nets. The handle design ensures quick installation and disassembly. In 1952, Israeli Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion offered Albert Einstein the post of president of the country, but the scientist refused, explaining his lack of experience in politics. Einstein remained in history as the only candidate who received such an offer without Israeli citizenship. During the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl in the United States in the 1930s, many families sewed clothes for children and adults from cotton flour sacks due to lack of money. Noticing this, flour manufacturers began to print bright patterns on the bags to make the finished items look more elegant. In a photograph from the beginning of the 20th century, craftsmen are making a carnival or theatrical costume of a giant duck made of wool and cardboard. Similar designs were used for street parades, plays, and satirical performances, requiring complex framing and hand finishing of every detail. The photo shows the members of the Quarrymen group, from which the Beatles grew in 1960. John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison played in the Quarrymen before the famous name appeared, and the beginning of a legendary era in the history of popular music. A photograph from the middle of the 19th century captures the construction of the Capitol Dome in Washington, the main building of the U.S. legislature. The central part of the cast iron dome was completed in 1866. On the set of the movie Labyrinth, USA, 1985, a 2.5-meter Lado doll with an animatronics of 18 separate motors is used to control facial expressions. The doll was controlled inside by 2 actors and 4 animators remotely. In September 1945, in Hiroshima, a month after the atomic bombing, Japanese schoolchildren continued their studies right among the ruins, using the surviving desks in the open air. In 1966, construction of the 4th Madison Square Garden Sports and Concert Complex began on the site of the demolished Penn Station building in New York. The frame of the 123-meter diameter circular arena was assembled in 2 years. In 1966, Bruce Lee taught his son Brandon martial arts elements at home in Los Angeles. Brandon Lee studied under his father's guidance from an early age and later became an actor and a master of wushu, just like his father. Schematic section, image of the internal structure of the liner Titanic, launched in 1912. There are 10 decks, a separate engine room, luxurious first-class cabins, dining rooms, a swimming pool, a gym, a post office, and numerous technical rooms. In 1917, Charlie Chaplin entered the field in the uniform of the New York Giants team, taking part in a charity baseball game for the benefit of the U.S. Red Cross. Such events were held to raise funds for the needs of the Army. In 1950, Conrad O'Brien French, a British intelligence veteran and traveler, was filmed in Banff National Park, Canada, greeting a wild bear with a typical cowboy gesture with his hat raised. In 1903, the airship Le Jaune flew over the Eiffel Tower in Paris. The pilot was Alberto Santos Dumont, a pioneer of aviation. This flight was one of the first public demonstrations of controlled flight of an airship in the urban area of a megalopolis. On May 20, 1941, members of the Young Republican Women's Club in Milford, Connecticut, imitated male entertainment, poker, smoking, and watching striptease as part of a social experiment. 20 packs of cigarettes, 40 servings of tobacco, and 30 cigars were consumed at the party. The event was recorded by photojournalist Nina Lin. Pedestrians cross an icy street in Times Square in New York City in the winter of 1978. At that time, record snowfalls were recorded in the city, which significantly complicated the movement of transport and the work of urban infrastructure. In 1964, an advertising campaign was held in Marineland Park, Florida. A killer whale named Moby was given a dental checkup using an enlarged tube of toothpaste to attract visitors. The Anglo-Zanzibar War between Britain and the Sultanate of Zanzibar on August 27, 1896, lasted 38 minutes, becoming the shortest in history. The conflict ended with the victory of the British fleet. September 1966, Northeast Vietnam. A photograph by photographer Mai Nam captured the moment of the destruction of an American F-105 Thunder Chief fighter jet in the Vinh Phuc area. The pilot ejected and landed by parachute. In July 1961, Yuri Gagarin, the first man to fly into space, visited Great Britain. The photo shows Gagarin in the cockpit of a British European Airways (BEA) airliner during an official tour after the Vostok 1 mission. On July 18, 1944, during Operation Goodwood, a British Sherman second tank rammed a heavy German Tiger II tank. As a result of the strike, both tanks were disabled and the crew of the Royal Tiger was captured. On May 2, 1982, the Argentine cruiser General Belgrano was sunk by the British nuclear submarine HMS Conqueror during the Falklands War. After being hit by torpedoes, the ship sank within 30 minutes. Pharaoh and Doris Cattle, immigrants from Texas, pictured in 1940 in Pie Town, New Mexico during the Great Depression. This portrait was taken by photographer Russell Lee for the collection of the Library of Congress. American Marines on Iwo Jima, March 1945, fire from a captured Japanese heavy machine gun. Captured small arms were used in the battle for the island, which allowed the use of enemy ammunition after a shortage of their own. November 1942, American women take classes in aeronautics at a high school in Washington, California. A teacher explains the design of an aircraft propeller, preparing women to work in the aviation industry during World War II. On March 16, 1952, in the Netherlands, a truck carrying boxes of gin overturned. As a result of the accident, alcohol spilled onto the pavement, and local residents gathered at the scene to monitor the aftermath. In 1917, German soldiers demonstrate the defense of trenches with hand grenades near Verdun in France, a key section of the Western Front of the First World War. The Pierre electric car, France, 1940, is a compact three-wheeled electric vehicle weighing 550 kilos, designed for 2 passengers. The car was powered by an electric motor and a set of 6 batteries with a capacity of 100 Ah, which provided a 12-hour charge from the regular network. Prisoners of war, soldiers of the Central Powers, in the camp in 1917, the First World War. By the end of the war, millions of soldiers from both sides were trapped in Europe due to the positional nature of the fighting. In 1903, in Portland, Oregon, a stuntman performs the death loop stunt on a bicycle. Such vivid performances with flips inside vertical rings were popular at the beginning of the 20th century at city fairs and circuses to attract the public. 1912. A sailor from a scientific expedition collects plankton off the coast of Antarctica using a long hook from a ship. Collecting samples of this kind was necessary for biological studies of marine life in icy waters during the great Antarctic campaigns of the early 20th century. In 1903, a circus performer demonstrates a power trick, holding a platform with 10 people on his shoulders. Such performances by the strongest people were very popular at fairs and booths of the early 20th century, emphasizing physical endurance and agility. In 1936, a tamer with 3 lions and a lioness during a performance by the British Circus, one of the most famous touring groups in Europe. Performing with predators required impeccable safety techniques and was considered one of the riskiest in circus art. On May 8, 1942, the American aircraft carrier USS Lexington, CV-2, sank in the Coral Sea after being hit by Japanese torpedoes and aerial bombs. The ship was abandoned by the crew after a fire and an explosion of ammunition. Japanese fishermen catch tuna with harpoons off the coast in 1938. Such collective fishing expeditions in coastal waters were a traditional Japanese fishery before the industrialization of fishing. Autumn 1942. German soldiers of the 6th Luftwaffe Army prepare to storm a Soviet warehouse in the destroyed area of Stalingrad. Fierce urban battles were fought here for months, and each building became a strategic point for both sides. Lumberjacks in Arcata, California, in the late 1940s, used dynamite to split a giant log into transportable pieces. This method made it possible to efficiently process and transport sequoia wood in the deforestation of the Pacific coast of the United States. American soldiers of the 2nd Infantry Division, with Marine units, prepared to attack German positions in the Belleau Wood Forest in France in the summer of 1918. Empress Cixi, the last powerful woman of the Qing dynasty, rides in a palanquin carried by eunuchs. The photo was taken in China around 1903-1904. In May 1944, Soviet sailors pose near a downed German plane on the coast after the liberation of Sevastopol. The capture of captured equipment and symbols of the Wehrmacht was recorded in photographs as part of the outcome of the Crimean operation of the Red Army. The main portal of the unfinished chapel of the Batalha Monastery complex in Portugal is an outstanding monument to Manueline, completed in 1509. In August 1942, 21-year-old Eunice Hancock works with a pneumatic grinder at an aircraft factory in the Midwestern United States. Women worked in large numbers at defense enterprises during the Second World War. 1926. Charlie Chaplin on the set of the burning circus scene for the film The Circus. Theatrical spotlights and large decorations were used to create lighting effects, and ash and debris scattered in the air are included in the final episode of the painting. An 1859 photograph shows Leopold I, the first king of Belgium, top right, with members of the royal family during a formal visit. The coronation of Leopold I, the former Prince of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha, took place in 1831 after Belgium seceded from the Netherlands. In 1910, former U.S. President Theodore Roosevelt and Kaiser Wilhelm II toured troops during maneuvers in Deberitz, Germany. The visit coincided with Roosevelt's European tour after the end of his presidential term, and was part of a demonstration of German military training in front of foreign guests. In 1954, Jacqueline Kennedy accompanies John F. Kennedy at the time of his discharge from the hospital after spinal surgery. This procedure was necessary after complications related to an early injury suffered by Kennedy during World War II. In 1930, American gangster Al Capone was captured during a visit to Cuba with Fritz Gordon and the mayor of Havana. Capone visited Havana during the Prohibition years to arrange rum shipments and meetings with suppliers. During the First World War, a baboon named Jackie was officially enlisted in the South African Army, received uniforms, rations, the rank of corporal, and awards for service. Jackie served as the mascot. In 1948, the SS Orang Medan sent a radio message with maritime distress signals in the Strait of Malacca. The ship was found with no signs of an accident, but all those on board died for unknown reasons. This is an artificially created giant mushroom, installed to attract attention or for educational purposes. A truly ancient organism is the mycelium of the Armillaria ostoii fungus in Oregon. Its age is estimated at about 2,400 years, and the area of the root system exceeds 8.8 km². In 1928, Laurel and Hardy co-starred with Edgar Kennedy in a deleted scene of a silent film. The comedy duo Laurel and Hardy was famous for their eccentric impersonations and situational humor. New York, December 1939. A queue at the department store windows during Christmas shopping. People are in winter clothes. Cars are parked along the street. The building is decorated with garlands. Members of the British tank crew clean the cannon of their tank in Tunis, 1943. The tank is camouflaged with branches and a blanket, and the crew is in summer uniform. In 1964, Neil Armstrong tested the LLRV lunar simulator at Edwards Base. Vertical takeoff was provided by a rocket engine, and training helped to land safely on the moon in 1969. Dr. Evelyn Ferris at the electric car, 1919. Electric cars were popular among scientists and ladies of the early 20th century. In 1954, Jacqueline Kennedy accompanies John F. Kennedy at the time of his discharge from the hospital after spinal surgery. This procedure was necessary after complications related to an early injury. A family of descendants of former slaves at the Petway Plantation in Guy's Bend, Alabama, 1937. People are dressed in work clothes, most of the children are barefoot, and the houses are wooden and simple. A tool for straightening and polishing safety razor blades, handheld, with leather or felt circles. When the handle rotates, the blade is sharpened and aligned at the edges. Willis Wynn, born into slavery in Louisiana in 1822, stands beside a log cabin in Texas, holding the horn once used to summon enslaved people to work. At age 116, he shared stories of life before and after freedom, turning his survival into living history. One of the most legendary figures of the Old West, Calamity Jane sits in her Livingston, Montana kitchen in 1901, just 2 years before her death. Stories about her daring adventures and mysterious life blurred fact and myth, making her a true frontier legend. The RMS Titanic, the largest ship in the world in 1912, sailed with over 2,000 people and met disaster after striking an iceberg on its maiden voyage. History remembers Lifeboat 14 and 5th Officer Harold Lowe for bravely returning to the wreck in darkness, rescuing survivors from icy waters. Desmond Doss, an American combat medic and conscientious objector, saved around 75 wounded soldiers at Hacksaw Ridge during the Battle of Okinawa in 1945. All without ever carrying a weapon. During World War II, American soldier Elmer Curley Richardson was gravely wounded and captured, only to have his life saved by German army doctor Ludwig Gruber, who defied orders and the rules of war to perform hours of surgery on him. The Taj Mahal, photographed here in 1865, was already a world wonder 2 centuries after its opening in 1648. Built as a monumental tomb by Emperor Shah Jahan for his wife. French engineer Louis Réard created the first modern bikini in 1946, naming it after Bikini Atoll, where nuclear tests had just taken place because he wanted his tiny swimsuit to make an explosive impact. Queen Elizabeth II's first official visit to Germany in 1965 drew huge crowds, marking a powerful symbol of reconciliation just 20 years after World War II. A young Pablo Picasso stands before Le Bateau Lavoir in Montmartre, the legendary Paris studio where he began his revolutionary journey into modern art. This building was home to iconic artists and the birthplace of masterpieces like Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. This rare portrait shows a Chinese immigrant family in Oregon during the 1890s, a period when strict laws and discrimination made Chinese families uncommon in the American West. Despite hardships, communities preserved cultural traditions. In this image from around 1915, a group of Muslim bandits in Xinjiang, China, stand armed and dressed for the harsh frontier. During this time, Xinjiang was a remote region where banditry and violent disputes shaped life along the Silk Road. Elvis Presley stands in the front yard of his house at 1034 Audubon Drive, Memphis, in 1956, the year he became an international star. Behind him sits his famous Cadillac, marking a turning point between rock and roll history and the energy of post-war America. Thea Alba, known as the Woman with 10 Brains, amazed audiences in the 1920s by writing with all 10 fingers at once, often producing separate texts simultaneously. Her skills went further. She could write with both hands, both feet, and her mouth. The VW fridge is a retro-themed appliance created through a collaboration between Gorenge and Volkswagen, mimicking the front of the iconic 1960s VW bus in both shape and paint. Winston Churchill frequently visited the front lines during World War II, personally inspecting British positions and raising morale among troops even under dangerous conditions. On October 31, 1938, Orson Welles explained to reporters that no one involved with the Mercury Theater's War of the Worlds radio broadcast had imagined it would spark such a wave of panic across America. This lively California beach party from 1930 shows groups of friends in early swimsuits, relaxing, posing, and enjoying the sun against dramatic coastal cliffs. This sweeping aerial view captures Rio de Janeiro in the 1930s, with grand avenues, bustling port life, and the iconic Sugarloaf Mountain rising over Guanabara Bay. Experts believe this 1903 photograph of a veteran Daimler documents the world's first known wedding car, capturing an early moment when automobiles replaced horse-drawn carriages for special celebrations. This is a chainmail pot scrubber, used for cleaning cast iron and tough cookware where food gets stuck on the surface. The rubber or silicone core gives it structure and makes it easier to grip, while the metal rings safely scrub away burnt bits without scratching or damaging the pan's seasoning. A group of elementary students in Lincoln, Nebraska, act out a trip to the moon in 1966, surrounded by handmade costumes and a universe of imagination. Just 3 years later, the Apollo 11 mission turned this classroom fantasy into real history as astronauts walked on the lunar surface. The staff of El Progreso newspaper stand in their Texas print shop in the early 1900s, a hub for Spanish-language journalism and activism. In 1914, the paper became famous when writer Jovita Idar bravely blocked Texas Rangers from shutting it down after publishing strong editorials. A teller serves a customer behind an ornate counter at the First National Bank of Austin, Texas, around 1910, reflecting the era's grand banking halls and high importance placed on trust and security. The table's inscription reveals it was hand-built by T.R. Boone, a janitor at the University of Nebraska, using white wood imported from Germany just before World War I erupted in 1914. Saved from the dump decades later, this table quietly preserves a story. This front page from the St. Louis Times is a remarkable example of the false armistice events on November 7, 1918, when rumors and miscommunication led newspapers across the US and Europe to incorrectly announce the end of World War I. This 1921 photo shows Prohibition agents enforcing the law by dumping barrels of beer, a common sight as authorities targeted illegal alcohol across the United States. The 18th Amendment and Volstead Act banned production and sale, leading to dramatic public displays like this. Billard Nicholas is a classic French table game invented in the 1890s, where players use air puffers to blow a lightweight ball around the circular board, trying to score goals in opponents' holes while protecting their own. This is a livestock fly spray applicator and scratching brush, commonly used for cattle. Livestock rub against the brushes to relieve itches, and the top reservoir dispenses insecticide or fly repellent onto the brushes, helping control pests while the animal grooms itself. This metal U.S. Social Security card is a rare find. These sturdy versions were not issued by the government, but instead produced by third-party companies in the 1930s-1950s, so people could keep a more durable copy of their Social Security number. This 1932 photo shows a radio show being recorded live, with actors reading from scripts and a dedicated crew creating sound effects using specialized props and equipment. This historic photo shows King Christian X of Denmark riding through Copenhagen during the Second World War, an iconic image of Danish resilience under German occupation in 1940. The king's unescorted horseback rides became a symbol of unity and national spirit. This 1952 photograph shows Pittsburgh shrouded in a thick cloud of industrial air pollution, an all-too-common scene during the city's coal-powered era. Dense smog from steel mills and factories often blocked out the sun, affecting public health and daily life. This odd-looking vehicle is a British one-man tankette prototype from 1934, designed for reconnaissance and light combat, but armed with only a submachine gun and minimal armor. Tankettes like this were ultimately too vulnerable and hard for one person to operate. The device on the left is a Bissell manual carpet sweeper from the early 1900s, which used rotating brushes and no electricity to pick up dirt from floors. The machine on the right is a modern Bissell vacuum cleaner, showing the company's remarkable evolution from simple mechanical sweepers to advanced powered home cleaning technology. It shows the interior of a New York railway station from the 1930s and 40s. Wooden panels, ornate grills, and oven heating create a characteristic atmosphere of the era. Narrow aisles, ticket booths with no admission signs, benches, and mechanical turnstiles. In this cabinet, you can see a collection of medicines and cosmetics from the USA in the middle and second half of the 20th century. Among them are old bottles of insect repellents, OFF 6 to 12, copper-tone sunscreen, Anisin analgesic, as well as various pharmaceutical powders and solutions. A woman in 1926 has a seam painted onto her leg to mimic the look of stockings, an ingenious solution popular when hosiery was expensive or scarce. This illusion was often created with makeup and an eyebrow pencil, helping women achieve the fashionable, seamed stocking. In 1953, Helen Keller met with U.S. President Dwight D. Eisenhower at the White House. Being blind and deaf, she saw the president by feeling his face with her hands. This was how she got to know people and memorized their features. Helen Keller was an outstanding activist and author. This unusual device is an electric tie iron, or tie iron, which was used to smooth out the creases and arrows on ties without damaging the thin fabric. Such devices were popular in the 1950s, when a neat appearance was considered mandatory. In 1948, a woman plays beach tennis on the beach in Tel Aviv, and in the background you can see the legendary sunken ship, probably the steamship Saturnia, which remained a symbol of the Israeli shores of the post-war period. 1900. Women's tennis at the Summer Olympic Games in Paris was included in the Olympic program for the first time. The tournament was held outdoors. The athletes performed in long white dresses, and the judging was already organized according to a modern model. Marilyn Monroe drives through the streets of New York in a 1956 Ford Thunderbird convertible, an iconic car of its time. The skyscrapers of Manhattan and advertising signs rise against the background, conveying the unique atmosphere of America in the 1950s. Circa 1860–1880, the ancient pyramids of Giza, Cheops and Chephren, in a rare photograph, where the monuments are reflected in a flooded desert lowland at the foot. The 19th century was the era of the first documentary visits of European photographers to Egypt. In 1912, members of a German student corporation made a collective self-portrait using a mirror, one of the earliest examples of selfies in the history of photography. In 1955, in Fort Worth, Texas, boys put on plastic space helmets for a session at the planetarium. Such ammunition helped to create a sense of immersion in the atmosphere of space exploration for children. 1800s, a unique structure, a 3-story wooden public toilet tower in Missouri. Such multi-level latrines were built for large residential complexes and brothels. Each floor served its own building, and the sewage channels of the common shaft allowed waste from the upper levels to fall through the structures to the lowest. 1920, immigrants from Austria-Hungary pose with their whole family at wagons and immigration barracks in Quebec, Canada. At that time, tens of thousands of migrants from Europe arrived in the country through the port of Quebec, dreaming of a better life in the New World. 1932, renowned photographer Charles Abbott takes an extreme picture of the panorama of New York City from the reinforcement frame of the GE building, 30 Rockefeller Plaza, under construction, from a dizzying height above Manhattan. Such tricks with tripods and surround cameras for the sake of unique views have entered the history of American photography. 1950s. The Blair Parsons store in Lynchburg, Virginia, was famous for its legendary dessert, 10,000-calorie sundae, for 35 cents. The girls in the photo receive a giant portion of ice cream in a classic American restaurant, where the showcase is filled with chocolate, chewing gum, and sweet treats. 1967. Payphone in the Haight-Ashbury area of San Francisco, a cult point of the counterculture of the 1960s. There is a warning note next to the instructions for long-distance calls. Don't say anything on this phone that you wouldn't say to a cop. In 1953, Queen Elizabeth II, Princess Anne, and Prince Charles meet with Winston Churchill at an official event. This is a rare shot that captures the young monarch's communication with the former British Prime Minister in the post-war era. In 1946, miner Rufus Sargent and his young son are having dinner at a wooden table after a hard shift. His father's dusty work clothes and simple rural cuisine reflect the everyday life of American miners in the mid-20th century. Sabiha Gökçen is the world's first female fighter pilot and one of the first female pilots in the history of aviation. In the 1930s, she became a symbol of progressive Turkey and flew dozens of combat missions, continuing to serve as an instructor and national hero of the country. 1929. Panic on Wall Street during the stock market crash. The legendary Black Tuesday. A huge crowd of investors, bank employees, and onlookers filled the streets of New York's financial district in anxious anticipation of news and further losses. The crash of 1929 marked the beginning of the Great Depression. Maximilian Kolbe is a Polish Catholic priest, Franciscan, and martyr who was arrested by the Nazis in 1941 for harboring Jews and political prisoners. In the Auschwitz concentration camp, Kolbe voluntarily went to his death to save the life of another prisoner. The photo shows the transportation and installation of a glass disc, which was a blank for the main mirror of the 200-inch Hale telescope at Mount Palomar Observatory, California. This unique Pyrex glass disc became an engineering sensation in the 1930s and ushered in a new era of astronomical research. This is a pull-out part for a tray table built into the armrest of a vintage armchair. The tray itself, with the corresponding pins, is attached from above. The pins are inserted into the holes of this rack, fixing the tray for stable placement of food or drinks. 1913. Nicholas II, along with his daughters Olga, Tatiana, Maria, and Anastasia, rests on board the royal yacht. Majestic white dresses, wide-brimmed hats, and navy uniforms reflect the atmosphere of luxury and serenity of the last years of the Russian Empire before the Revolution. 1926. 10-year-old John F. Kennedy, wearing a protective helmet and a sports uniform with the letter D on his chest, was then playing football, demonstrating team spirit and perseverance as a child. 1933. Actress Jean Harlow poses in the ring with legendary Italian heavyweight Primo Carnera in front of a crowd of thousands at a boxing match. This photo shows the contrast between a fragile movie star and a giant champion. 1972. Prisoners play chess, stretching their arms out of cells in a U.S. prison. Cornel Capa's photo demonstrates a rare moment of leisure and intellectual communication in the isolated environment of a correctional institution. 1918. New Zealand soldiers pose in position with a captured German Mauser T-Gewehr anti-tank rifle near Grevillers during the First World War. The weapons and equipment of the Allies contrast with the harsh conditions of the front and the underground shelters of the Western Front. 1949. Henri Matisse works in bed in Nice, France, surrounded by papers and books, while his cats rest peacefully at the artist's feet. The picture illustrates the creative life of the master in the late period of his life, when work on sketches and layouts was carried out right at home. 1858. The first ever official photograph of a baseball team, the Knickerbocker Baseball Club, Hoboken, New York. The players pose with the coach in a top hat, contributing to the formation of American sports culture. Aerial view of Hiroshima, Japan, taken on July 20, 1946, exactly 1 year after the atomic bombing. The photo shows the consequences of the destruction, an extensive network of streets and ruins of buildings. The restoration of infrastructure is just beginning. May 1929, Berlin Night Street. A street vendor pours alcoholic drinks to customers after the official time when the sale of alcohol was prohibited by law. The scene reflects the atmosphere of the Weimar Republic on the eve of the Great Depression. 1918. An American field hospital is deployed inside the ruins of a church in Neuville, France, during the fierce fighting of the First World War. Among the columns and under the arches are wounded soldiers and orderlies who use the dilapidated building as a temporary shelter to provide medical care in combat conditions. In 1852, a group of men pose in front of the Lynch slave market in St. Louis, Missouri. The picture refers to the period when the slave trade legally existed in the state, which was abolished in the United States only in 1865 with the ratification of the 13th Amendment to the Constitution. The photo shows a set of metal bowls for a milk separator centrifuge, in which, when rotating, cream is separated from milk due to different density of fractions. Such bowls form the drum of the device and have been used on farms since the end of the 19th century. 1915. Women clean the carriages of an electric train of the Southwestern Railway in England. During the First World War, the mass mobilization of men led to an increase in the number of women in railway industry jobs, including rolling stock maintenance. Before the war, such professions were closed to women. On December 16, 1929, the airship R-100, designed for 100 passengers, docked at the tower in Cardington, England. The R-100 was built by Vickers at the Howden plant using a duralumin frame, was 215 meters long, and had a volume of 146,000 cubic meters of hydrogen. 1965. Unemployed British miners play dominoes and cards at a table with glasses of beer and ashtrays. During this period, the UK saw an increase in unemployment in the coal industry following a series of miners' strikes and production cuts. The photo shows an antique telegraph switchboard, a manual switchboard for connecting and switching telegraph lines in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. Each row of levers and discs controlled the route of the electrical signal between the stations. 1909. Men discuss the details of a balloon competition on a lawn in London. In the background are filled gas balloons, prepared for launch, reflecting the interest in aeronautics and the popularity of balloon racing at the beginning of the 20th century. An American medic provides first aid to a captured German soldier during World War II and gives him water from a canteen. The Red Cross is visible on the armband of the medical worker, the International Badge of Medical Personnel on the battlefield, 1940s. American paratroopers of the 101st Airborne Division prepare to be deployed in France on the night of June 6, 1944, during Operation Overlord. D-Day. The landing took place from C-47 aircraft and marked the beginning of the Allied landings in Normandy. August 19, 1961. Konrad Schumann, a non-commissioned officer of the GDR People's Police, jumps over a wire fence on Bernauer Strasse in Berlin to cross from the east side to the west during the early days of the construction of the Berlin Wall. His escape is recorded as one of the most famous symbols of the beginning of the division of Germany. 1912. Frederick Fleet served as an observer sailor on the British steamer Titanic and was the first to notice the iceberg that caused the largest maritime disaster of the 20th century. Fleet survived the crash while in lifeboat number 6. His testimony became key in subsequent investigations into the death of the liner. 1965. Otto Frank, the only surviving member of the Frank family, and Anne Frank's father, poses with 4 girls holding the Japanese edition of the Diary of Anne Frank, written by his daughter during the Nazi occupation of the Netherlands. In the 1960s, the book was actively translated and published all over the world, including Japan. 1979. Freddie Mercury, lead singer of the rock band Queen, signs an autograph for a child in the backstage of a mobile touring venue. In the late 1970s, the band was at the peak of its popularity, conducting large-scale world tours. 1857. Queen Victoria, Prince Albert, and their 9 children pose for a family portrait in early Victorian England clothing. The photograph captures the entire royal family 9 years before the death of Prince Consort Albert. 1983. Bundeswehr soldiers undergo tests of protective suits against nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons in the Ebersberger Forest near Munich, Germany. Such exercises were conducted regularly as part of the military's preparation for the potential effects of weapons of mass destruction during the Cold War. In the 19th century, central heating in homes was considered a huge luxury and a technical achievement. In the photo, decorative casings and grills hiding radiators are organically integrated into the interior of an American house from 1874 so as not to spoil the interior. One of the first exercise machines for posture and back was invented by Swedish physician Gustav Zander in the second half of the 19th century. His devices mechanically corrected posture and strengthened muscles, becoming prototypes of modern rehabilitation equipment and fitness equipment. The construction of the legendary Neuschwanstein Castle in Bavaria, built by order of Ludwig II, began in 1868 and lasted until 1884, although the castle was never completed. The photo shows an antique cast-iron fireplace screen from the Victorian era of the late 19th century. Such decorative panels protected the room from sparks and the heat of an open hearth, and the intricate openwork ornaments reflected popular styles and aesthetic preferences of the era. The White House, built between 1792 and 1800 for the presidents of the United States, has been repeatedly rebuilt and modernized. The archive photo shows the large-scale reconstruction of the West Wing in the middle of the 20th century. The process includes the renovation of load-bearing structures, facade decoration, and the use of heavy construction equipment. The photo shows workers and giant construction equipment during the construction of Hoover Dam, 1931-1936. Engineers and builders use a multi-level drilling platform to drill rock in the canyon of the Colorado River. The process required extensive mechanization. 1929. Doctors vaccinate a boy against rabies after being bitten by a dog. The vaccine, based on the work of Louis Pasteur, had already saved lives by preventing the development of a deadly infection. 1947. Michael A. Musmano, American judge, presides over the Second Nuremberg trials, which dealt with the cases of Nazi war criminals after World War II. These processes were key to the formation of international criminal law and the concept of crimes against humanity. 1959. Chef Julia Child works with editor Judith Jones on the manuscript of a new cookbook in the kitchen, surrounded by papers, notes, and kitchen utensils. This collaboration later brought success to one of the most famous recipe makers in American gastronomy. Commemorative Bill. the first dollar earned by the author's grandmother at her first job and saved in honor of her first paycheck on May 28, 1943. The bill shows the city of Reading, Pennsylvania, and a touching signature from my grandfather, which emphasizes the family and historical value of the artifact. The collage illustrates the career of a firefighter. Above is the first experience in the cockpit of a fire truck in 1969. In the center is service in the department against the background of a classic car, and below is the time before retirement.